Hi, I'm Sonia Joins, and on behalf of the Alleghany Historical-Genealogical Society, I'd like to welcome you to this episode of Alleghany Memories. The idea of Alleghany Memories is to create an archive of interviews with older folks in our area. There are no scripts. The people we feature are able to choose their interviewer and the location of the interview, so that they're comfortable and able to tell their stories in their own words. If you'd like to participate or you know someone with Alleghany Memories, contact information for the Society will be posted after the program.
Hello, I'm Mayor Wes Brinegar, and on behalf of the Alleghany Historical Society, we welcome you to this edition of Alleghany Memories. Along with me today is a special guest and a special man, and it's a great honor to introduce to you General Tom Metz. General, thank you for being with us today and looking forward to having this sit-down interview with you.
Well, I'm looking forward to sharing whatever you need from me today, and I really appreciate this opportunity.
General, let's just go ahead and start off, and I'm going to call you Tom.
Please do.
So, Tom, let's just go ahead and start from. Give us a little bit of details about you, and let the people know who you are.
Well, I was a very lucky young guy that grew up in Elkin, North Carolina, which is just, many people know, is just south of here. Our parents would bring us all up after church on Sundays to Doughton Park, so we got to see the Blue Ridge a lot. And we all fell in love with it. I've got two sisters across the state line in Galax, and I've got my two brothers have homes over not far away from us in a little place called Deer Tracks. And we all just loved it, but we all went our separate ways, and now I've pretty much come back, and we really enjoy this part of the country.
So you've been retired now from the military for how long?
A little over 10 years.
10 years, and now you've moved up here to Alleghany County, and you've got a home here and everything like that. And what an amazing thing to me is that our paths crossed were in the post office many years ago, and I've become very intrigued with you, and you've got so many stories to tell, and I can't wait to get into it. What made you decide to do the military career, John?
Well, my dad's brother, my Uncle Gary, was retired colonel. But he was just, whenever he came, we would be so excited because he always brought gifts and fun. And we always looked forward to Uncle Gary and Aunt Alpha coming. What's interesting about his story, which I tell often, is he's a graduate of the Citadel class of '32. And my father's family was from Charleston. The Depression got him all the way to Chatham blankets in those days. But Uncle Gary, when he got out of the Citadel, couldn't get a job. It was a Depression. Hometown sweetheart wouldn't marry him, so he decides to apply for West Point. And he got in with a class of '36. But he had already spent 4 years at the Citadel. He didn't want to, so he resigned. He still couldn't get a job because of the Depression, so he re-enters the class of '37 at West Point. Now he's the oldest guy in his class. He gets commissioned and had a great career and retired a colonel. And I always said, gosh, I want to be like Uncle Gary. I want to follow Uncle Gary. And I guess I just said that to myself so many times, it became something that I was going to do. And as it turned out, I didn't pay much attention to the academics. My oldest brother, I couldn't top him. He was a valedictorian. My next brother was the captain of the football team and the president of the student council and all those things. And they had both gone off, Walt to Duke and Bob to NC State. And so I knew I couldn't get right into West Point. So my uncle suggested, and the football team was kind of recruiting and using the prep school. The other academies had used their prep schools to help the football teams, and the Army had not. And I was the first class to go, but I had to get in the Army. And that wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be, because as a sophomore in high school, I got my right knee torn up real bad. So I played off and on that year. Didn't have a good junior year. I kept hurting it. My family finally, my parents went down to Duke to this orthopedic surgeon who worked on the football players, and they took my cartilage out and gave me some exercises to do, and I got in really good shape for my senior year. And I was fortunate enough to be the captain of the team, and as it turned out, we were the first undefeated Elkin High School football team.
Wow.
So I just loved the sport, and I had not done very well academically. I'm sure that my uncle did some backdoor stuff to make sure I got into prep school. But the bottom line was I had to enter the Army. I had to be an enlisted soldier in the Army.
Right.
So I went down to Charlotte, and I knew that my knee was going to be a problem, and it was. And I had to stay overnight. They gave me a little voucher to go to the hotel near the induction center, and I was a little kid. I just did what people told me to do.
Right.
But I didn't have any money.
Right.
So I finally got the doctor let me swear in. Got on a bus and went to Fort Jackson.
Now, what year is this?
This is right out of high school. I graduated high school, and 2 weeks later, I was in the Army. In fact, the date was 29 June, 1966.
1966.
So I get down to Fort Jackson, and it's the 4th of July weekend, so nothing's going on. But all these guys in uniform are bossing us people in civilian clothes around.
Right.
And we found out a week later that the only difference was they got their uniforms and we didn't. So I learned right away, understand who's really should be in charge. Mm-hmm. So anyway, they bused us then to Fort Gordon, and there was a busload from New York, a busload from Baltimore, and a busload from Charlotte. So there was a great mixture of cultures and people and colors and you name it, but those drill sergeants were, just put us in, and off we went.
So at this time, Vietnam is getting ready to kick into high gear.
It's heating up. It's 66.
So are you nervous at all at this time, or
no,
you just
in fact,
are you excited about it?
My mom was the one that was nervous because I had enough money to buy a few postage stamps. And I wrote them a letter about halfway through basic training, and I said, if this West Point thing doesn't work out, these are great guys. I'll go to war with them.
Right. And this is going on, and of course during this time, Vietnam again heating up, and a lot of guys were going straight to Vietnam right out of boot camp. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts there as you go through boot camp, you're progressing, you're moving on. What happens next?
Well, I was good at about everything, all those skills. I could shoot a rifle. I grew up M14. Mm-hmm. That's a big old 30-06 rifle, but it could shoot straight as an arrow because I could hit anything. Mm-hmm. So I remember one time I didn't have to hike. I looked at walking to the rifle range as a hike. It wouldn't work. It didn't seem like. Mm-hmm. But we didn't. I'd already qualified, so I didn't go that day. I was on duty, and then a bunch of us decided we would sneak out of duty, and we're old World War II buildings, and we hid in the old cool underneath where the cold used to be.
Yep.
And I'll never forget, as long as I live, that door opened, and there stood somebody that had more chevrons on his shoulder than I'd ever seen. And boy, he squared us away. We got back to duty.
In a hurry, right?
We got back to duty. So lesson learned.
So you go through boot camp, and let's move forward a little bit here. You getting ready to graduate.
Yeah.
Where they sending you?
Well, they were sending me to Fort Belvoir, but none of the drill sergeants knew anything about United States Military Academy Preparatory School. But I did, and I was glad to get those orders. Okay. And the first plane ride I ever had was from the Winston-Salem Airport to the Washington Airport, and I had to find my way to Fort Belvoir. I did it, but I was nervous, and what the prep school did for me is allowed me to mature and make up all the lost time that I had goofed off in high school on fundamentals of math and English and all. And we practiced taking the SATs. Every Saturday morning we took another old version of an SAT. I got good at picking those, what was the right answer and
Right.
But but to kind of give a little cushion, I went to my congressmen and my senators and said I would like to get in an academy. I'm working at the prep school to get my academics up physically. I'd gotten in the Army, so my knee apparently wasn't a problem. And I did. I got I won the appointment to the Air Force Academy from one of my congressmen, one of the state congressmen, and then later on I got the one from the enlisted ranks, because the enlisted ranks get so many appointments to West Point. Wow. So I got one of those. Obviously, I went the West Point route, but it was just to take a year out of your life to regain the academics that you should have already had. But at the same time, I wouldn't, North Carolina at those days wouldn't compete with the New England schools or the California schools. I mean, when I went to West Point, a bunch of my classmates had already had calculus. I had Algebra 2. So I was really glad. I've always been glad that I went to the prep school, because I think if I had gone straight to West Point, I'd have been in the bottom of my class. I was already ranked in the bottom quintile, but I graduated in the top quintile.
So you improved once you got there. You had made your mindset that you was going to do this and do it right.
Yeah, and the prep school gave me the time and the atmosphere to get it to really be much better off once I got in the academy.
Now, not a lot of us have had a chance to go to West Point or officer school. I have known some officers and told me some stories. Now, I was an enlisted man in the Marine Corps, so I don't know anything about the officers. Talk to us a little bit. Here's Tom Metz stepping foot at West Point. What's going through your mind?
Well, it's a demanding place, but because I had been a private for a year and preparing for it, it didn't bother me. I mean, I didn't panic. I did what they told me to do. Right. I did it better in most cases. So I never had any trouble. I didn't ever get many demerits because I was a little more mature, and it was something I wanted, and so it went very smoothly. So and fortunately, the academy was very math science oriented in those days. Right. Now that's changed a lot, but for me that was good, because that's my natural capability is in the math and sciences. So I did really well plebe year, because most of the plebe year was math. I mean, it drove everything. Everybody, if you were bad at math, man, you're in trouble.
So we're at West Point, and how long do you stay there in the West Point Academy?
It's a full 4-year
So
college.
You're there for 4 years.
Yeah, 8 semesters, 3 or 4 summer schools, and
they're just dogging you to death, I'm sure, right?
Well, there's a lot of training. I mean, the plebe year summer training is just taking a bunch of civilians and making them cadets. The next year's summer is taking cadets and beginning to make them soldiers, because it's all Army training stuff.
Right.
And then your junior year, you get to go out to a unit somewhere in the world. I was high enough in the class, went to Germany to see what was going on, and I knew that I wanted to be an infantryman, but armor also seemed to be a good branch, right. An exciting branch. So I went to an armor unit to see what it was like. And the first week, we downloaded all the ammunition. In those days, the Cold War, all the tanks were loaded, ready to go to war. So the first week, we unloaded all the munitions. Now, because of Vietnam, I only had 9 guys in my platoon. The second week, we did quarterly services on that tank. My 4 tanks in my platoon. Then the third week, we reloaded all that ammunition, And the 4th week, we went to the railhead and rail loaded to go to Hohenfels and train, and that was my month, and it was over with. I didn't want to be an armor officer. Man. So I'd pretty well made my mind up.
So it's time to do something else then, right?
Going to be an infantryman.
Okay. All right. So how did you make the switch?
Well, you didn't make a decision until late first semester, your senior year, for branches and then assignments.
Right.
And because of Vietnam, there wasn't any fight to get infantry. You bring the whole class into a big auditorium. They've got up how many each branch will get, minimum and maximum. And so the number 1 guy in the class stands up, and generally they would want to go engineers. So I'll take an engineer slot.
Right.
They'll take that one off the board. Then the number 2 guy in the class. I mean, he goes.
Right.
Got 1,000 in the class. Well, I guess we had let's say about 850. So it's a slow, long process.
Mm-hmm.
But you do a couple of to kind of give you an idea, especially if you're low in the class, what might be available.
Oh, Lord, yeah.
Because once you get to the maximum you can get in that branch, you can't get any more.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew that the engineers would be running out about the time I got. And I knew that this guy, a classmate named Franklin, was the last engineer. So when I stood up and there was 1 engineer billet still on the board, I looked at Franklin and I said, Franklin, you can have that engineer because I'm going infantry.
So you already made your first sacrifice here as an officer.
Well,
really, you're giving it to another guy because you could have took.
I could have taken it, but I didn't want it. I wanted to be an infantryman, and so all that, those 4 years just worked out really well for me. And I was high enough in the class when we went back inside the infantry to pick assignments, and nobody was going to a unit that was in Vietnam. And really, things had turned, and we were bringing people out of Vietnam in '71. And since I'm a North Carolinian, I wanted an airborne job position, but I didn't want to go to Fort Bragg. I wanted to go a little further away from home.
Okay.
Well, there was 1 unit in Germany that was an airborne unit in Mainz, Germany, and I was high enough to get that assignment, and that was great. Now, get to go to Germany, and I get that $110 extra pay to be an airborne, and I got to be in an elite unit. I mean, life is
good for Tom Metz at this
for me.
time,
It
and
sure
he's okay.
Very much so.
I just want to get off a little bit of track right here. Have you met your wife yet at this time in your
I
life?
haven't met Pam yet.
So you haven't met the wife yet.
No.
So you're a single guy in Germany. Jumping out of aircraft.
But what was interesting, though, when I get there, not only was everybody in the brigade airborne qualified, we also had motor pools full of mechanized equipment. So we were on the war plans to fight as a mechanized unit or the war plans to fight as an airborne unit, which really is just about impossible. I mean, to train both ways. But quarterly, we would pack up in those armored vehicles, 113s and M60 tanks, and we would drive on German roads from Mainz down to Baumholder, which is half a day's drive in a 113. And we'd train for a while. But you got these crazy, very high caliber but excitable airborne troops jumping out of the back of 113s or climbing on tanks. It was a dangerous, and I learned early as a young officer the value of being on top of the safety issue.
Right. At this time, this is in the early 70s, you're over there in Germany. What was, of course, we had fought the Germans in World War I and II.
Yeah.
What was their mentality towards Americans at that time in the 70s? Were they friendly to you?
Yeah, they were very friendly. A lot of our peers age-wise weren't because of the Vietnam, but there was the same kind of atmosphere, social atmosphere in Germany as it was here in the States. I mean, no one was seemed to be for the war, and it was almost, looks like it was going to be over with pretty soon. But what was always, I guess maybe 6 months into that assignment, the rumors started going around that they were going to take our outfit make it a pure airborne outfit, and move it to Vicenza, Italy. And everybody wanted to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was just rumors. I mean, every day at the mess hall over a cup of coffee, everybody, what rumor did you hear? I mean, who
Right.
are the older lieutenants going and the brand new ones, and us and the guys in the middle aren't going, or advice the next day would be different. So,
I'm sure that back then the Army was like what I was when I was in the Marine Corps. It's the same thing. You hear rumors. It's hurry up and wait. It's always doing this and always doing that. Orders changing at the last minute. So Tom Metz is in Germany, and now he's getting ready to go to Italy.
well, I didn't know that.
You didn't know that, but this is where your path is getting ready to go, right?
But they brought in a guy that was going to be the battalion commander, his sergeant major. They took a major out of our battalion to be the S3, the operations guy, and he really liked me, so he got me to be his gopher. We were building a whole new battalion, so I was going to be the go for this, go for that,
Right.
and I knew where everything was, and I had reasonable personal skills, and so I was just running around doing things.
And that's a good position to have because that builds more knowledge of the operation
Absolutely.
altogether.
So we were bringing in individual soldiers all around from the 8th Division that were airborne qualified. And our sergeant major and a couple of senior NCOs would look at, when they came in that morning on a truck, they would look inside the truck and they would say, "Hey, Joe, you can just sit there. I can tell from your glassy eyes that you're on drugs." So we got to handpick the whole battalion. So that was one of the best battalions in the United States Army because everybody was handpicked by the NCOs of the upper echelon. Mm-hmm. So it was very, very fortunate to be in that group. But because I wasn't married and I had a buddy that wasn't married, there were two of us lieutenants kind of doing the gopher thing. We'd train up and get them all organized and send a company down to Italy. And so I was the battalion XO and my buddy, the three of us were the last three to go to Italy. And off we went in our little sports cars, and we drove.
So you drove to Italy on your own?
I drove to, we left Germany. We were the last to go.
Okay.
But we got to go.
You got to go.
That was, and so we're, not long after I got there, another great thing happened is I get selected to be the scout platoon leader for the battalion. And that's the premier lieutenant position, for sure. But the combat support company was out at a airfield called Bosco Monaco, which was between Verona, it's a beautiful city, and Lake Garda. So here I am, a single lieutenant, living on Lake Garda, going to work with the absolute premier unit of the United States Army, and just learning a lot, getting to know what right looks like, and I'm really blessed.
So you're learning, and you've got some good teachers that are teaching you and utilizing your skills that's going to come to play in effect later on down the road in your career.
Absolutely.
So you're building that great foundation. Now we're going to jump around just a little bit because you've been to a lot of places, and now I mean we probably don't have enough time on the TV to talk about all the places. So let's go to the place where Tom Metz meets his wife.
Well, I met Pam. When I went back from my first assignment, you go to what's called the advanced course as a young captain, and I living off post, Willow Creek Apartments, and Pam lived with a girlfriend and not far away. I was up on the second floor, and they were down in more of a apartment than my little room, and we just. But she was dating a guy that was an upperclassman of mine at West Point. Okay. and he was in the company I was in, so I knew Bob Harper very well.
Wow, okay.
So Pam and I just got to be friends. And when Bob Harper finishes the advanced course, he was a couple of classes in front of me, and he leaves. He didn't leave an engagement ring on Pam's finger. So I asked Pam one afternoon, I said, "You want to go to the movie well, yeah, we'll go see the Pink Panther. I'll never forget it. And so we went to the movie, and on the way home, Pam gave me the lecture that she only dated one guy at a time, and she was dating Bob Harper, and I was a nice guy. And so I said, well, I gave it my try.
Right.
And then Pam's roommate leaves. She has to go home for a couple of months, I guess, and she gets another roommate and comes back to Willow Creek. And one day I find on my door handle a little plastic bag with some homemade bread in it. Now the way to Metz's heart is through his stomach. And there's a little note in there that said, if you want to play some tennis, I would like to. So I might have another shot. And so we played tennis, got to be friends. Bob Harper was gone. We got engaged.
Right.
And she wanted me to tell the one funny story about.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Because I had been assigned to Fort Jackson by this time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was going to take leave to get married, go honeymoon, pack up, and bring Pam back to Columbia, South Carolina. So when I leave my apartment and I get down to Columbus, I gave Pam the key to the apartment. I said, we got to put this so we don't lose it. I'm bad about losing things. So we put it in the top drawer of her dresser. Went off on the honeymoon, came back, got to U-Haul it, and it says put so much weight forward. So I put the first thing we put on was the dresser.
Mm-hmm.
So now we get up there to Columbia, going to unload. Where's the key? Pam said it's in the dresser. Well, the dresser's up against the back of the U-Haul. So that was our first little uh-oh.
Oh, yeah.
So we got all moved in, and then the phone rings, and it's the battalion adjutant. He says, you are to be in the commanding general's office tomorrow morning at 8:30. I said, what for? He wants to interview you to be his aide-de-camp.
Okay.
And I thought, holy mackerel. So I went and interviewed. I got the job. He was a 2-star moving to Fort Knox. I'd already started communicating with West Point about going to graduate school and going back and teaching because I had done well in the sciences. But at any rate, off we go. Pam lived in Columbia less than a week, and we packed up and moved to Fort Knox. So she was already an Army wife.
An Army wife.
She already got a couple moves under her belt.
Yep. And the reason that I brought that up is because a lot of times, and I know that you've seen it over your career, I've seen it the short time that I was in, being married in the military is very, very tough. And it takes a special woman to be married to an officer or a Marine or anybody else, a sailor, because on a moment's notice, we're gone.
Well, we, in the 36 years that she was married to me on active duty, we moved 24 times. So she knows how to move.
She knows how to move. She's got U-Haul's numbers
That's
memorized, right?
She does.
That's just amazing. And again, that gives her a shout out too, because that takes a special lady to do that stuff and man the home front, watch after the kids and the whole 9 yards and everything like that. So, General, let's go to something here, and I want to ask you this. Out of all those duty stations that you had early on, and this is before you become a general and you do your other things, what was your favorite?
That's hard to answer because they all were good. The two that really stood out because I was in a field grade officer by the time I got to, because I had 2 tours at Fort Riley and 2 tours at Fort Hood. The people were so good to us. The community just treated you not like a royalty, but they really respected what you had to do, the demands on your time, and they were just wonderful people. So both of those installations were like that.
So you're at Fort Hood, and again, Fort Hood was in the news many years ago with the Fort Hood shootings that went on out there, and so forth. Very sad, but that still doesn't put a damper on the citizens there that live there and the people that are there. So
they really did treat us very well, and so it's so hard to decide between those two. Those were both great assignments.
Did you have a least favorite? Is there one that sticks out where you're like, well, I don't want to go back there again?
I got to answer that a little bit longer. I had gone to the Army War College as a lieutenant colonel, and I was not promotable to colonel, which meant I would be reassigned as a lieutenant colonel when I got out of the War College. Well, that was great because that meant I could still be a G3, which is a premier staff position for an infantryman. The G3 is in charge of the operations of the division. And so the only time I ever lobbied for any assignment in my career was to be a G3. So I sent every division commander, there were 10 at the time, a letter and said, I would like to be your G3. And the commander in Korea, everybody assumed the 2nd Infantry Division is a light division, Indian Head Division. I mean, so it's got a tradition of being a light division. Mm-hmm. But the commanding general recognized it as a heavy division because it had tank battalions and mechanized battalions and lots of artillery. Mm-hmm. And he wanted an infantryman that was on the mech side. And so that really made me, so the one that I chose and went forward to and went from the War College to Korea. But he wanted assignments for 2 years so that the families could come and have more continuity than everybody coming for a year and everything changing out. So the family lived down in Seoul. I lived up at the Camp Casey, which was near the Yongsan was the town. And I think when it was all over with, in 2 years, I did the math, and I got to see the family about 24 hours a week for 2 years.
For 2 years.
So that was Pam had to carry the load on the family side. Now the children loved to come up. They'd get on a bus that went from the post at Yongsan up to Camp Casey. And they would just sit there. It was like a carnival ride for them because of the bus drivers with cars and craziness.
Right. Now, what year was this about what time frame are we looking at right there?
Early 80s.
In the early 80s. So as we look at our relationship now with Korea, North Korea especially, was there any hostilities over there in Korea at that time? I mean, I was very young. I don't remember. I was like 12 about that time. So, but how was the feeling towards Americans in Korea?
From the South Koreans were great, but the North was always trying to stir the pot a little bit, and there would be a small raid that would just go across the border that would get everybody alert, or something would happen. I mean, they were always doing that, especially when we changed we'd rotate battalions up to the demilitarized zone.
Right.
And when a new battalion would come in, you could just rest assured that they were going to do something just to test that battalion commander and see if they overreacted or underreacted or whatever. An interesting was the Gulf War, Desert Shield, Desert Storm.
Right.
Because that's when I was there, and I had not fought in any combat. And there I was. I'll never forget it. The G2, the intelligence was late. We were going on filling a bus, and we were supposed to go to some social thing. And I'm kind of the senior among equals, and I'm trying to get everybody together, and the G2's not there. And finally, Phillips gets to the bus, and I said, "Where have you been?" I didn't say it quite that nice.
Right.
He said, I just couldn't. I was down in the skiff, which is an enclosed area so that you only classified information, and that's where you accepted it. He said, "I've been watching Saddam Hussein invade Kuwait. I mean, this is unbelievable."
Now, what's your rank at this time?
I'm a lieutenant colonel.
So you're a lieutenant colonel, and here we are getting ready to
go to war.
Go to war.
And I ain't going because I'm in Korea. What was interesting to me, of course, I was the operations guy. I'm really looking hard at what's going on in North Korea, because I'm privileged to South Korea information, and I knew that all the precision weapons were leaving the peninsula. If there was ever a time in my mind that the North Koreans may try to do something, it might have been while we were focused on. So we were pretty alert and watching things closely, but I think somebody must have called them up and said, "Don't confuse us, because we don't want to fight you right now, but don't give us a reason." And everything really got stone quiet on the DMZ.
Right.
It was really interesting.
Now, this is the time when President Bush, the first President Bush, he's in office and made that famous speech.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed, its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
What was going through your mind at that time? Were you ready to go?
I was ready to go, but nobody was leaving because everybody in Korea wanted to go to the fight. And nobody's going to the fight, except for I'll never forget it, a helicopter comes in, and I'm the operations guy. I know what's happening in that division, and who ordered a helicopter to land on our helipad? Well, then I see the assistant division commander for maneuver run out, a bunch of bags, and get on the helicopter. And he got picked by Schwarzkopf to go and help out. But the rest of us stayed on the peninsula. Stayed in Korea.
Peninsula. So at this time, you're stayed there. When do you get to leave Korea? When is your time up?
Well, when my 2 years were up, I had been selected to command the 2nd Brigade of the Big Red One at Fort Riley, Kansas.
Oh my goodness!
And
how many men is that? You remember?
The brigade combat team's about 4,000.
So you have 4,000 men under your command. That's a
And
big responsibility, ain't it?
Oh, it is. But it's when you've kind of prepared yourself and worked hard, some of which was to my future chagrin, because I had stayed, once I did the teaching at West Point, I made up my mind I was going to go back to the operational Army, and I am not leaving it. I got behind in all the joint requirements and the other things you need to do strategically. But when I got to that brigade, I mean, I knew exactly. I mean, I had spent time in a brigade at Fort Benning, a time in a brigade at Fort Knox, time in a brigade. I was a G3 of a heavy division in Korea.
So you know it it's like the back of your hand right here.
I was ready.
You're ready to roll
and,
at a moment's notice.
We were, and the Dagger Brigade was great traditions. It just really went well to the point I didn't want to leave, and so the Chief of Staff position came open. So instead of going to the Pentagon, which I probably should have done, I stayed to be the Chief of Staff.
So you had a chance to go to the Pentagon.
You can go to the Pentagon anytime you, but I just kept away from it. Okay. And again, I shouldn't have. But I enjoyed and I was good at the operational Army. I knew how to fight, and I wanted to be ready for a fight. If the nation needed me, I wanted to be super ready for it. And the Dagger Brigade was a great, because by then the National Training Center had developed. I got our brigade into every training thing I could muster. And a lot of times I'd have to go to the commanding general and go, who gave you the authority to commit yourself to that operation? I said, well, sorry, I wasn't total committed. But I mean, he knew that I was out there looking for chances to really make the companies, the battalions of the brigade as good as they could possibly be.
So we're going to change it up just a little bit more here again, and I'm going to ask you something, and you can tell us as much as you can. And the thing about it is that you have a lot of information that you can't share with everybody, and that's still top secret stuff. But when did you get the first call to go into combat?
That is really a tough question, because I was commanding Fort Hood in the 3rd Corps. But I had, previous to that, I had been the Chief of Staff of Central Command. So I knew a whole lot about the war, the plans for the war. I knew all of it inside and out. But we had not planned, I never felt we had planned correctly and completely for taking the combat side to its conclusion, and what do you do next? And I think the world knows that. I mean, I don't think that's in question. But what was in question was you can't keep those initial troops over there forever. You got to have some kind of rotation.
Right.
And so as it turns out, it leaks out, but finally it gets published that the 3rd Corps would go replace the 5th Corps in Iraq, and that's I'm commanding the 3rd Corps, and so
Right.
we go do that.
So you're in Iraq. Here we go, and this is your action time. What's going on at that time, General? That you can share with us? What was actually happening right there?
Well, I got there right after the holidays between '03 and '04, and it was very, very stable. In fact, a lot of officers and NCOs would do their PT and go from Camp Liberty and run downtown Baghdad and back. It was that calm and safe. That all changed, however, in April of '04. Several things happened. One, we had made some decisions to shut down some newspapers and take some secondary and lower leaders on the Shia side. A lot of people don't understand Sunni and Shia.
Right.
Shia are about 60% of Iraq. I think the Sunnis are about 30% and the 10% of the Kurds. But the Sunnis had always dominated the authority and the leadership. And the Shia are seeing this as an opportunity. And so late March, we shut down a newspaper, we arrested a couple of guys, things that I learned a very, very valuable lesson. Know what the effect is when you do this over here, shut down a newspaper, and what you do over here, arrest the 2nd or 3rd guy on the Shia side, and then on the Sunni side, they have murdered and desecrated the bodies of Blackwater contractors out in Fallujah. And by the middle of the month, we have a fight all over the country. I mean, everybody's in a fight. I really think the enemy missed an opportunity because as a chief of staff, all the operational time I have, the higher you go, logistics becomes even a more important, you pay a lot more attention to it.
Yes.
And when you can sit in your office and see 5,000-gallon tankers burning, you know that we got trouble. Because we drank 1 million gallons of diesel a day in Iraq. And so as a Corps commander, making sure that we got the resources, every morning when they did the briefing, if we brought in or less than 1 million gallons, before I slept, somebody had to come tell me how we're going to make up the shortage. Because you have to have.
You've got to have it to operate.
Yeah.
There's no.
So by the 1st of April, the National Command Authority tells us we need to take Fallujah back. You got Jim Conway, who is going to become the Commandant of the Marine Corps. He was commanding the 1st MEF. You got Jim Mattis, who's going to be the CENTCOM commander and the Secretary of Defense. I mean, you got 2 great officers.
Yes.
And their point was, we've got everything on camera. Everything that those thugs did to murder the Blackwater contractors and desecrate their bodies, we got it on tape. We'll find those people. We don't have to attack the whole town. But the order was, and within less than a week, the enemy won the information fight. And it chiseled into my brain that information and influencing, although we have psychological operations and we've talked about it, I saw it happen. And it made a big difference to me.
But it also makes your job so much tougher, right?
Well, yeah,
I mean, you're fighting up an uphill battle now.
Well, but you're right. But you get off the subject just a little bit. because I am a proponent of, you've got to figure out how to train for and operate in this what's called a multi-domain environment. Because we fight pretty good on land, pretty good at sea, we fight under the sea, we fight in the air very well.
Right.
But we also got to fight in the cyber domain, in the space domain,
Absolutely.
information domain, and for all that to get synchronized for the greater good is very hard to do. So, I mean, I could go on forever about that.
But this is a time in our history where technology is booming, and
Well, it's changing so
it's changing
fast.
so fast. They've got the same phones that we've got. They've got the same. They're getting satellite reports too, I'm sure,
Yeah.
of everything that you get. I mean, and the information world. I mean, I know for when we were hunting Bin Laden, he's hiding in caves and he's able to escape us all the time.
Yeah.
So he knew where we were, what we were doing before we even did it. But so you're I don't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead. You're fighting that information battle, and things are really hot.
Well, in the case of Fallujah, we lost it because the solution finally was let the enemy have Fallujah, and we'll call them the Fallujah Brigade. But it was we had no control over it whatsoever. Now there's a whole bunch of behind going from being the 3rd Corps commander and a bunch of changes and all, but eventually we established a 4-star headquarters, multinational force, initially commanded by a very good friend of mine, George Casey. And then the 3rd Corps had become the multinational corps. So I was commanding about 120,000 troops of the whole coalition. And it was the summer of '04. We've given up Fallujah, but we were required by the UN resolution to hold an election no later than the 30th of January 2005. In midsummer 2004, we had a weekly, nightly intelligence deep dive. So all the intelligence guys would come in and update the commanders on all the things they're seeing, and so it was a weekly event. That particular night, I asked the staff, we got to have this election by the 30th of January 2005. That's 6-7 months away at the time. And I said, we're going to have a successful election here in Baghdad. Everybody nodded. So we're going to have a successful election in Mosul, which is a big northern city, and Basra, the southern city.
Right.
And I named a few more. And General Casey picked up on what I was doing because what I wanted to know is Fallujah in the list. They came back the next week and they listed them out, and Fallujah was, I think, 12 down on the list or whatever, but it was a city that we would have to have a successful election in order to meet the mandates of the UN. So I said, okay, we're going to start preparing now, because this is not going to be an easy fight. Fallujah is a city of about 280,000 people stuffed in a pretty tight.
Wow.
We estimated that about 30,000 bad guys in that city, IED factories, torture chambers. It was just our
Bad
intel
place.
was bad place. So we were going to have to retake it. But deep in my little brain, a little country boy from North Carolina, I said, I got to win the information fight. So we began at that stage to figure out how we shut the enemy down and tell our story. And the neat thing is, I want our story told because I can tell it in a good way and be factually right and not deceiving. And we got to learn how to do that. And that's one of the things the higher level of the command worked on that, while the Marines out in Fallujah were getting ready to go door to door and have one tough fight.
An update now on military action in Iraq and the ongoing assault on Fallujah. Pentagon reporters talked with one of the ground commanders via satellite today.
By way of introduction, Lieutenant General Thomas Metz is the commander of the multinational corps in Iraq. He's the operational level commander responsible for the conduct of coalition military activities in Iraq. This includes the forces that are engaged in the Fallujah operation, which he's here today to give you an update on. General Metz is also the commander of the U.S. Army 3rd Corps, which is normally based at Fort Hood, Texas, but which now has its headquarters and several of its subordinate units deployed to Iraq. With that, sir.
Thank you. Multinational forces are just over 48 hours into Operation Al-Jafar. We renamed the operation, which is translated Dawn, to signify the new beginning for the people of Fallujah. We're operating according to our plan, and so far we have achieved our objectives on or ahead of schedule.
What happens in this Phase 4 here?
Well, as we transition from the Phase 3 Bravo, or cleaning up the city, we've got to get all those last fighters out, because they will represent a security problem, a stability problem. We've got to get that work done. Clean up those caches of munitions and booby traps. That's hard, laborious, in-game kind of work for Phase 3 Bravo. And then in Phase 4, enormous amount of work. We've got to bring the electricity back on. We've got to bring the water pumps back up, get the sewage running again. That's a lot of just tough work. We've got to clean the city up so that we can then, all the investment that we have got ready, we can start that investment in schools and municipal buildings and factories and power plants. There's just a lot of work left.
Yeah. Why should you feel optimistic sitting on a couch in Oklahoma?
Because the power of people that want to be free can't be stopped. People that want to be free will find a way to overcome the intimidation that these thugs have brought upon their country.
How do you describe Fallujah now?
Well, Fallujah is a city of probably 5 kilometers by 5 kilometers, housed 300,000 people, most of whom left. There has been destruction in the city, but a minority, a very small percentage of the city has received that destruction. It needs a lot of cleaning up. It needs electricity turned back on, water fixed. There's a lot of work to do, but it is certainly within our capability to help the Iraqi people get back on their feet in Fallujah.
What's your message to Iraqi voters right now who look to the U.S. to ultimately provide security in Iraq? I understand the election day will be handled primarily by Iraqi security forces, but ultimately the responsibility still rests with the U.S. So can you guarantee that if voters go to polls on election day that they won't be attacked or killed?
No, I can't make that guarantee at all. And I see ourselves, the coalition, as a partner to a sovereign government who has been mandated by a UN resolution to conduct the elections, who has built a commission to conduct the election, who has invited in international leaders to monitor those elections, and who is putting together a security force to secure the polling sites. We are offering technical advice to how that's done. And we are continuing operations across the country, as I mentioned earlier, to continue to pursue the terrorists after they're eliminating their safe haven of Fallujah. But I can't guarantee that every person in Iraq that wants to vote goes to a polling booth and can do that safely. We're going to do everything possible to create that condition for them. But we are fighting an enemy who cares less who he kills, when he kills, and how he kills, and he will work out a way to find some weakness that we're going to work hard not to give him, but I just can't guarantee that everyone will be able to go to a poll in total safety. I cannot put a bubble around every person walking from their home to the polling site, but we're going to do everything possible that we possibly can in the next 3 weeks to create that condition for them.
General, it's just amazing of all this stuff that you've been through and seen and done. I want to ask you this, and I know me and you've talked about this before, is who influenced your life? Who's some of the folks that you had and that really influenced you? I know Gary did, and
Well, yeah. My football coach for my senior year, John Charles. Just a great leader. He wanted me to be his captain of his football team, and I was delighted to do that. And there's non-commissioned officers along the way. One of the proudest things that happened to me, my sergeant major, who I had selected and pulled out of Fort Knox in the Armor School, go to war with him, come back. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Pace, wants to create a senior enlisted advisor to the chairman. And he called me and said, "Can I have Joe Gainey?" I said, "Sir, I'm not going to tell the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff no." "Yeah, you can have Joe Gainey." I went running down the hallway and I said, "Joe, you got to make a decision because that phone's going to ring in just a minute, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is going to ask you to be his senior non-commissioned officer."
That's amazing.
So above and below me, there have been people that have helped me. The thing that I tried to continue to do, and I continue to this day, is to be a mentor to those that I think really have a tremendous potential. Because my career was saved, I could spend a whole nother round with you on how many times my career was over with, and it really wasn't, because mentors took care of me. You got to take care of people, and they took care of me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my job is to take care of all those NCOs and young officers that help carry me.
That's right.
And I'm very, very fortunate because I'm what's called a senior mentor or subject matter expert. Doesn't pay very much, but I really enjoy doing it. A couple of weeks ago, I was down at Maxwell Air Force Base. There's a joint flag officers warfighting course. So you've got all the different services represented by very, very talented active duty people that are working on their fighting skills, and I'm a mentor to that. I was just so fortunate that time and time again, when the situation got and Metz is headed in the wrong direction, not because he was trying to, but that's the way the assignments went, I get that shifted.
That's amazing.
And I had not, I ended up missing the brigade command list 4 or 5 times. I wasn't going to be promoted to a general. And I had a great career. I mean, I wasn't down about it. But I had to go to a joint job.
Right.
Because the Goldwater-Nichols Act, made that requirement for a flag officer had to have had a joint assignment. But the Corps commander calls me up. The list isn't out yet. I don't know that I'm on the list, but he does because he set the board. He calls me up and says, "Metz, get out of that seat you're in and go get in the assistant division commander for support seat. You got the job." I went home to Pam and I said, "Well, that's a colonel's position. I guess I'm not on this list." And I accepted it. I mean, so I move into that new billet, and what happened was he was taking care of me because, you would want to have an assistant division commander job to go further. And he got me in there knowing that the first brigadier job, when you get the star on, has to be a joint job. And so I get taken care of. And I go off to the joint job, and I didn't know the first thing in the world about the Pentagon. I'm going to the Joint Staff, J8. That's a staff. I mean, I know staffs 1, 2, 3, and 4, but 5 I'd heard about. 6 I knew a little about. 7 I didn't know anything about. 8 I sure didn't know anything about. But it was all about resources and how it was a great opportunity because I learned how the whole system worked, and I had to work it. I had to. And your famous Marine Hoss Cartwright. I mean, he became a very close friend because when the Air Force 3-star would tell this 1-star Army guy that had never been in the Pentagon something to do, I'd write it down, but I'd follow Hoss back to his office and I'd go, "What did he tell me to do?" Hoss kept me, here's what you go do, Metz, and I go do it.
It's amazing how everything works together.
Yeah.
Ain't that right, General? I mean, it's just amazing, and you've worked with every branch that we have in the military and everything, and I just want to commend you and thank you for the many years of your service. And it hits me here because I, too, not even though I'm not an officer, was a leader of men.
Yeah.
And I was a corporal in the Marine Corps and had 30 guys underneath me. I took it very serious, as you took your job very serious, and we all do as leaders like that. It is our job to make sure that them boys come home.
Yeah.
And on behalf of all their families, General, I will say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, and that means the world to us. Any other closing thoughts that you want to share with us? Any memorable moments right fast that speak out? Anybody that you met? I mean, did you get to shake hands with the presidents and all those, and Schwarzkopf and all those guys?
Well, Rumsfeld was picking the 3 and 4 stars. When I was nominated to be the 3rd Corps commander, there were 3 of us, and I'm sure that the other 2 were capable of doing it. They were offered by the Army, and I got it. Rumsfeld picked me, and I wasn't going to give it to anybody else. But he really, when we were going to switch out the 3rd Corps and the 5th Corps, he was really concerned about, who I was and was I capable of doing it. And that's when the mentors jumped in. Said, Metz is fully capable of doing this job, And so after, we successfully handled Fallujah in November of 2004. We held our election, which is strategically the most important thing I ever did.
Yes.
We pulled that thing off. I'm very proud of how that was done. It was done right. It's sanctioned by everybody. And I get a card from Rumsfeld that says, well done. No
better feeling in the world than to have your peers recognize you.
Yeah.
On behalf of a grateful nation, we'd like to take this opportunity to thank General Tom Metz for his service to our country, and we thank you for joining us here on Alleghany Memories. And if you happen to see General Metz out in the public out there, shake his hand, tell him that you appreciate that, or any veteran for that matter. Just shake their hand. It means the world to them, and tell them that you appreciate what they have done. We'd like to take this chance to thank the Alleghany Historical Society for allowing us a chance to sit down and talk with General Tom Metz. I'm Mayor Wes Brinegar, and we'll see you next time on Alleghany Memories.